June 22nd, 1941. At approximately 4 o'clock in the morning, the silence along the eastern borders of Europe was shattered by the thunder of artillery. Thousands of German guns opened fire at once. Warplanes roared across the sky. Nearly 3 million German soldiers began advancing into Soviet territory. It was the beginning of Operation Barbarossa, the largest land invasion in human history. Adolf Hitler believed this campaign would be swift and decisive. He considered the Soviet Union a weak giant that would collapse after a few powerful blows. German commanders predicted that Moscow would fall within months. Many believed the Red Army would disintegrate under the pressure of Germany's fast-moving Blitzkrieg tactics. Confidence was high. The German war machine had already conquered much of Europe. Poland had fallen. France had surrendered. The Balkans were subdued. Now, the focus turned east. The attack was launched without a formal declaration of war. Soviet forces were caught off guard. In the first weeks, the German advance was devastating. Entire Soviet divisions were surrounded and destroyed. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers were captured. Luftwaffe aircraft destroyed Soviet planes on the ground before they could even take off. German tanks rolled forward at incredible speed, cutting through Belarus, Ukraine, and the Baltic states. To many observers, it seemed that Hitler's gamble was working. Cities fell one after another. The German army pushed toward Leningrad in the north, Moscow in the center, and the oil-rich regions of the south. The scale of destruction was enormous. Villages burned. Civilians fled in terror. Millions were displaced as the front line moved deeper into Soviet territory. But beneath the surface of early success, serious problems were beginning to emerge. The Soviet Union was vast, far larger than any territory Germany had previously invaded. As German troops advanced hundreds of miles, their supply lines stretched, dangerously thin. Fuel, ammunition, food, and winter clothing had to travel immense distances across damaged roads and railways. Mechanical breakdowns increased. Vehicles wore out. Horses, still heavily used for transport, died from exhaustion. Then came the Russian autumn. Heavy rains turned roads into seas of mud. Tanks and trucks became stuck. Progress slowed dramatically. What had once been a lightning war transformed into a grinding struggle. Yet the most formidable enemy was still ahead, the Russian winter. By November and December of 1941, temperatures plummeted to -30 or even -40 degrees Celsius. German soldiers were not equipped for such extreme cold. Weapons froze, engines refused to start. Frostbite became widespread. Soldiers wrapped themselves in blankets and rags, trying to survive nights of brutal cold. The same army that had stormed across Europe now found itself immobilized by ice and snow. Meanwhile, Joseph Stalin rallied the Soviet people with a call to defend the motherland. Factories were dismantled and moved east of the Ural Mountains, far from German reach. Production resumed at astonishing speed. Fresh troops from Siberia, trained and equipped for winter warfare, were brought to defend Moscow. As German forces approached the Soviet capital, they believed victory was close. They could almost see the city's outskirts. But in December 1941, the Red Army launched a massive counteroffensive. Reinforced and determined, Soviet troops pushed back the exhausted German soldiers. For the first time in the war, the German army was forced into a major retreat. The myth of German invincibility was broken. Operation Barbarossa had been designed as a short campaign. Instead, it became a prolonged and brutal war of attrition. The fighting spread across thousands of miles. Casualties mounted into the millions. Entire regions were devastated. The invasion also hardened Soviet resistance. What had begun as a surprise attack turned into a desperate struggle for survival. In 1942, the conflict shifted southward. eventually leading to the catastrophic Battle of Stalingrad. There, an entire German army would be surrounded and destroyed. The losses suffered in the East were staggering. Germany now faced a powerful enemy determined to fight to the end. By invading the Soviet Union, Hitler had opened a second massive front, while still at war with Britain, and soon the United States. Germany's resources were stretched beyond capacity. The long Eastern Front consumed men, weapons, fuel, and time. Every mile gained came at terrible cost. Many historians argue that Operation Barbarossa was Hitler's greatest strategic mistake. His decision was driven by ideology, ambition, and overconfidence. He underestimated the Soviet Union's capacity to resist and recover. He ignored warnings about the dangers of winter and the challenges of distance. Instead of delivering a quick victory, the invasion trapped Germany in a war. It could not win. Operation Barbarossa was not merely a military campaign. It was a turning point in World War II. It marked the beginning of a brutal conflict that would eventually lead to the collapse of Nazi Germany. Millions of soldiers and civilians lost their lives. Entire cities were reduced to ruins. The Eastern Front became one of the bloodiest theaters of war in history. Looking back, the invasion of the Soviet Union changed the course of the war. What Hitler believed would be a rapid conquest became the beginning of his downfall. The decision to launch Operation Barbarossa reshaped Europe and determined the fate of millions. It was a gamble driven by arrogance and belief in unstoppable power. And in the frozen fields of the East, that gamble failed.